The Spoken Token is a proud member of the Pod Studio One podcast network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the big show. I am Larry Neal.
Hey, and I am Alex Wallace.
And we are the Spoken Token podcast. Mr. Alex, sir, how are you doing?
Larry, I have to say this.
Do you have to?
I do. My life may have changed as of this weekend. I know. Everyone, don't worry. I'm still married to my wife, and I still have my 3 kids. I haven't lost my job or anything. But I may have found my new favorite game.
What a teaser.
Yes, and that's all you're going to get from me for this moment, because now Larry has to do the legal stuff, I think, right?
Well, I mean, we can call it whatever we want to call it. But before we get to the intro and get back to that...
Before you go, can you do this whole thing in the Micro Machines legalese? You remember that guy? It's like he used to do the Micro Machine commercials.
John Machida, and no.
Oh, the Mario guy is the same guy that did the Micro Machines commercial?
No, John Machida is not the guy who did Mario.
Oh, are you sure?
Positive.
Who is the Mario guy then?
You can look him up.
All right, I guess I'll look him up. All right.
But while Alex is doing that, we're going to do a little bit of a different show, different format this time. The wonderful event that Alex has alluded to and will regale us with tales from is from a fairly hot recent release. And so we were very, very fortunate and blessed that he got an opportunity to experience it firsthand. So we want to dig into that a little bit. We want to give it some space. So we're going to just go back and forth, and we're going to talk, and I'll ask him some questions, and he'll relay his experiences to us as far as what he ran into and what he thinks, and maybe we'll dig a little bit into some other fun things. But again, a little bit different format, probably a little shorter show. So still sit back and relax and just come with us while we talk about a new, very hot release that I'm going to continue to tease until after the intro. And we will be right back right after this. Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Spoken Token podcast. This time, a very special episode number 121. Alex takes us along as he recounts his time with Disney Lorcana at a local launch event. He covers the event itself, the game, and the very special wingman he took along for the ride. He also shares his general thoughts about the game with Larry, and then they cover some of the other events surrounding the Lorcana launch and offer that unique Spoken Token perspective. You do not want to miss that. So, sit back, relax, get your sleeves out, and turn us up as we join your hosts, Alex Wallace and Larry Neal. And we are back.
Oh, and I was going to say it too.
I see that. I
was so ready. But I honestly, I couldn't handle it because all the teasing you did, it just threw me off my game.
Just about ready to pop.
Yeah, I know. It's Charles Martinet is Mario.
There you go. Yeah, so, it's not John Machida for sure.
But oh man, John Machida, he was my favorite. But I'm a little sad you didn't try and emulate him. Just the way how fast he talked.
You missed that period of my craft. When I was younger, I could do that. And,
oh my gosh!
Because of course I was a little bit old, Micro Machines. I mean, but still I was a kid, and so we played with him. But of course he was in Transformers, the animated film, and then everything he did was that quick. So I was forever walking around doing that. So for years and years, I did that. But I will say now, as I have gray on my face, I have sort of moved on beyond. That's moved a little bit beyond my capabilities. I could prepare to do it. But there's no way I could do it on the spot at this point in time. There's no way. Oh. And for those of you who don't know who John Machida is, you need to look him up and go listen to some of his stuff. It was truly amazing. And I'm not saying that he didn't prepare, but still, the guy had talent. I can't emulate that on the spot at this point. I would have to think about it.
It's intense. It's intense. All right. But okay. So to kind of sort of lean into what Larry and I have kind of been teasing the last couple of minutes is I actually got to participate in a Disney Lorcana release event this past weekend. Oh, absolutely. And since then, I have been playing the game nonstop. And I just wanted to take some time. Larry and I thought it would be appropriate because we've talked about it for so long. I mean, our
Mm-hmm.
last episode we even discussed sort of the kind of the negative pieces about it that we were looking for. So we don't necessarily want to talk about the release strategy or or product or any of that kind of stuff, because that's,
Well,
I mean, maybe Larry wants to go on that, but I want to spend some time on the game itself,
yeah,
and
absolutely, absolutely.
to help you decide if it's something that you want to look into, and then if you do, then we'll talk about the product release and whether or not you're going to be able to play this
Right.
till February of next year.
and my and
Um,
my honest opinion is that we can't give a full view without talking about that launch, but we certainly don't want to or need to concentrate on that part.
okay,
So
yeah, all
so
right,
yeah, so
so
we'll bring some of it up, but let's get into what the game is and let's go from there. Why
let's do a
don't you
little.
just tell us what you want us to know first, man? And then if I've got some questions in there, I'll interject. But how did it go? How was it? What did it feel like? What was the day, man? Come on.
All
Regale
right,
us, man.
so
Spin a yarn, spin a yarn.
spin a yard. So, all right, go back. It was Wednesday, a week ago. No, I was really looking. I wanted to participate in a release event, and so I found there was a local store near where we live, about 30-45 minutes away, and I knew the owner, and so I decided that I was going to do that. Well, and then the idea came in. It was like, I really, watching this, seeing this, I really think my boys could play. And so I took my two oldest children along. My youngest didn't, or my middle child didn't necessarily get to play, but he sort of sat and watched. But my oldest son played,
Okay.
and he and I played in this release tournament, and it was such a joyful event. And it's one of the things that I want to kind of talk about the game itself. So I'm gonna kind of tell you about the game, how it plays, what are my
Absolutely.
impressions of it, and then I
Hmm.
will get into my experience in the release weekend, because I think you have to have a better concept of the game to
Sure.
really understand how to do the release weekend. But so Disney Lorcana is it is it's a perfect mix of um, the ease of play of Pokemon. Though now I do say the mass appeal of Pokemon. So let me amend that statement. The mass appeal of Pokemon. So in that, like, it's easy to pick up a deck and with Pokemon and kind of just sort of roll with it. Now, of course, Pokemon, there's a lot of intricacies that you can get into, and I would also use the same kind of allusion to Digimon. It's a pretty the barrier to entry is very, very small. Like a turn is simple, it's easy, and can be explained. Like, you will have a grasp of the game within 2 turns.
Okay.
And so on the complexity curve of how to kind of learn it, it's sort of on the lower end, where I would put something like Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic kind of on that higher end, just to kind of getting into.
Yeah.
So it's on the lower end, but that does not mean it doesn't have wonderful choices that you have to make. And that was actually, so the first thing I want to bring up is that though this game is simple in design, it is so well thought out that as you play, you're like, oh, I see what they're gonna like, this little decision I had to make, the designers can run with this and create whole new mechanics. And so as a base set, it does such an amazing job of teaching you the game and what it's trying to do without overwhelming you in
Sure.
rules that change, or cards that break rules, and those kinds of things. But there's still a taste of that
Yeah.
in some of the design that they do. I mean, and so I was the decision making is so delightful. And so basically, what you do, you'll draw your hand, and then you have your first decision you have to make is, on your turn, what card are you going to flip over and use as a resource? So it's very similar to the WoW card game, where in WoW you could use any card you want, you could flip it over, and it becomes your resource or your land or your mana, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
Here, in Disney Lorcana, almost every card is what is referred to as inkable, meaning you can play it straight from your hand, upside down or face down onto the board, and then it becomes a resource. You'll never be able to use it as its intended card, but you'll be able to use it as ink. Now, there are some cards in the set that are actually what are called uninkable, and these are typically stronger cards. And so when you get them into your hand, you can only play them. You can't actually use them as a resource. And so that in itself is a wonderful decision when it comes to deck building. It's like, all right, how many of these stronger uninkable cards am I going to put in versus these the ones that I can actually ink? But so just the very first game I ever played, the first hand I drew, knowing that like the moment it hit me, like, oh, I don't get to play every one of these cards in my hand. I actually have to sacrifice one of these to be my resources, and I have to do that every turn until I don't want to need any more resources.
Okay.
And it just instantly, my mind just went. Just a huge smile came on my face, and I was like, "Oh, that's fun." That's so because again, just the do I save this card and I ink this other card, or do I skip do I not play anything and ink this weaker card, or do I try to play on curve? So that's the whole round of decision making. The other decision making is so you can never play anything on anyone else's turn. You only play on your turn, and which is kind of simple, makes things right. But there's 3 types of cards. There are character cards, item cards, and action cards. When you play a character card, the ink has to dry, so you actually don't get to tap it. Well, they call it exert it until the next turn. So it's like summoning sickness and magic or all of those things. But what happens is when you tap it, you can do a number of things with it. You can tap it to quest with it, which is how you win the game.
Okay.
And so questing is, instead of trying to take your opponent down, you are actually trying to reach. You're trying to like race in a sense. I mean, I know we are talking Summer of Games, but it is a race. It's the first to 20, and so
Okay.
every character has a lore value. And what happens is when you can tap them to quest, and then you just add that amount of lore from that character to your pool. And then again, the first to 20 is the winner. Now, the problem with that is every time your character is tapped, it then now becomes an open target for all other characters on the board to do what is called challenge. Challenge is the next action you can do with your character, and that's you can tap it or exert it in this case, and then you choose another character on the board and do direct damage to that with your character. All the characters have an attack and a willpower, which is just attack and defense. But all damage stays on the characters on both sides. So it's not like in Magic where it falls off. So you have to decide, like, okay, if I quest with this character, that leaves them open to a challenge later on. Because if you leave them unexerted or just straight up, they cannot be challenged by other characters. So that decision is like, okay, do I race to get all of my lore, or do I use my character to try and take out and prevent my opponent or opponents from getting lore?
Okay.
And so that decision is just fascinating because it's always this push and pull of, am I playing do I just play solitaire and try and make them come to me, or do I attempt to do something of my own, but also try and prevent my opponent from doing stuff? And I just have to say, like, it might seem simple to a lot, but it was the sweet spot of just every turn. I got to think there was always something to do on every turn, and it was always like, what is the most optimal move for me, or what's a risky move, or just what do I want to do this turn? So there was a lot of freedom in that. And so that was so again, just the decision making, I think, is my first point overall about what I have I ultimately I'm starting to fall in love with in this game. So I know I've spun a lot of yarn here, but
well, I was going to say, just let's make sure that we just give just a basic 5,000-foot view overall of what it is that you're trying to do, maybe without digging too deep into the decisions, but like more of a rules kind of, okay, how do you play? So from putting those first cards, from shuffling the cards and dealing you your hand, what is it that you're doing? Walk us through.
Yeah, so I mean, I did kind of allude to a little bit earlier, but ultimately, I mean, if you've played a collectible card game, you'll step right into this, and it will not be an issue. You draw a hand of cards. It does have a really great mulligan rule, which really the favors the player.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you do that, every turn you can ink one card, so that's like putting it face down for your resource, and then you can play as many cards. All the cards have a cost.
Yep.
In the top left-hand corner, you can play as many cards as you have the ink to pay for them.
Okay.
And so once you play the card, it is then on the battlefield. Items you can actually exert right away.
Okay.
Characters you have to wait a turn, and then you
Yep.
can use actions. And actions are how you interact with other characters or other players in the game, and they do various different things. So,
Okay.
but ultimately, that's it. Like it has a cost. You pay it. You play it, and the rules on the cards always supersede the rules in the of the game.
Printed in the book, yeah, standard thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, yeah, with
hmm
a card game moving forward and living. Well, okay, well, very very cool. Cool. On so, how was the event itself in terms of atmosphere and availability, product? How was all of that?
So, all right. The event that we got to participate in was handled well. It was handled, I mean, just like a regular, a Magic draft that I had done, in days of yore. But what's interesting, it was so fascinating because every single person in that room was starting fresh. Now, there were two people who had been to Gen Con, and
Yep.
so they had actually gotten cards and had been playing a little bit of, quote unquote standard, but no one had actually done a pack draft, which
Right.
which was the format of the event.
Yeah,
And
and
so
let's be real. There's a lot of allure to that.
it was surreal
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I mean, Magic's been around for 25, 30 years.
Yep.
So you go to an event, at least one person has done multiple of
Mm-hmm.
these. Here, no one had any idea what
Right.
was good, how to
Right.
build. I had done a little bit of research, and so I had kind of an understanding of like some ratios of cards to certain things. But outside of that, so we sat at a pod, and you open a pack. There's 12 cards to a pack. There are two rare slots, and then there is a foil slot, which could be a rare. But the way that this was organized was every first pick in your draft, you actually got to pick two cards from the pack. So
Okay.
every time, so there were four packs. So four times in your entire draft, you actually got to pick two. So that means you actually, if you cracked open your pack, you could take the two rares if you needed to.
Yep.
And there were times where I didn't take the two rares because
Yeah.
there was an uncommon or something that I wanted. But yeah, and then so you passed left, then you passed right, then you passed left, depending on the pack, and you built your deck. But one of the standard deck building rules of standard is there's only two colors. You can only have two colors in a deck, and there's six total colors. Well, in draft, you're drafting 48 cards for a 40 card deck, and in that 48, like you can have whatever color you want. And so it was just, you started drafting based on what you wanted to do, not like within Magic or Pokemon and stuff where you're like, oh, well, I have to have this color to match this resource and those kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Right.
And,
Right.
and it was just so freeing. And everything about it was meant to say, hey, we're here. This game is just to be fun. It's just to be fun. And then that gets to kind of my second point that I want to make about the game is that the game, like the art on the cards, almost the non-confrontational um, nature of the
Well,
game
it is
itself.
it is Disney.
Right, all of it just went to make me feel I just felt joy. I felt joy. There was like seeing my son Jackson play, and even when he was losing, just having a ball, and he wasn't getting frustrated because, he wasn't getting the mana or doing this, and the cards were easy and he knew what he was doing. But then there were some things where he's like, oh, I can do this, and then I can do this. And just to see them. And then, some other younger kids were there, and the atmosphere it created wasn't this like, oh well, I'm gonna stomp you, you little turd, and all that kind of stuff. The adults in the room were just having a blast, and the art is just, it's so Disney. It is so Disney because it is Disney that you just can't help but be like transported back into this, like nostalgic feel of like, yeah, man, this is what it was like experiencing the cartoon for the first time, or whatever. And so for those two angles, I just keep going. Like I just it's
That's
so
a
much fun,
that's a
so much
really good
fun.
point you just made, and I do want to ask you a question on that. So let's say you're someone who's not that into Disney's movies. Is this going to still pull in and be an enjoyable experience in your opinion, or do you think that may diminish it some if
You know,
someone's
I
not a
I
huge
think I
fan?
think I think that's a valid point. I think if you are looking for something that's dark and gritty and
Well, not so much that.
no no
Like I
no
said,
no
let's
but
just say
no
you're
no
not a Disney fan, so
no no
that
hang on,
pull won't be there.
I got a point here. I got a point here. If you're someone who's looking, for something dark and gritty, and you like a more mature theme, like this actually could be off-putting to you. If you're someone who is you don't care about you don't care about the Disney license, and you're looking for a much meatier experience, this is not for you. Not to say that this isn't a meaty experience, but the complexities, like something like Magic or other TCGs out there that have been around for several years, this does not have that. And so, like, if you're not a Disney fan and you're looking for a pretty deep experience, this is probably not for you. But if you're someone who
Okay.
wants a medium weight TCG, then I think the Disney art you'll look at it and go, oh, that's actually kind of nice, and it will be it won't be like a make it or break it for you. But the game that was my biggest concern, was that the game was just going to rest on the art and not the game. But I can safely say that
Okay.
the game is incredibly solid, and even if it this game benefits from the Disney license, but it would be enjoyable regardless if it didn't have the Disney license. Um, and so, but it just makes it that much more compelling. Um, and so, I do kind of want to get into my last point here, as I sort of land my plane. But ultimately, I talked about complexity. This game isn't there yet, but this game has set itself up to do so many very cool things. And right out of the box, you don't have to do anything you don't have to affect or change the rules for multiplayer. So just last night, we played, let's see, we played 4-player for 3 hours, and just back and forth,
Okay.
and switching up decks. You don't have to change the rules, and it was still just as amazing as my head to head matches.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's just built in multiplayer, and the cards work exceptionally well in that realm. And also, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there's so many unexplored things that the designers have left the door open to,
Sure.
that will bring in a much more complexity. Now, one of the things, this set is only 204 cards, so it is a very skimpy set when it comes to a typical release. The smaller Magic sets are like 279 or something like that.
Um,
What is Digimon? Is that like 100?
that's what I was thinking.
I
Yeah, I
think it's
think
actually,
those sets are smaller than Magic sets too.
yeah, but not the core sets. Not core sets. Core sets are usually large, and so
I can
yeah,
probably
so
source that, but I think they are
that's fine.
smaller. This is a good spot though because I wanted to ask. Now we can get into a little bit of the discussion that we should probably cover. That's not directly on the game. Is This is a good as good a point as any to do it. So you touched on something. You said, "Hey, this game is something that's going to grow, and they've left a lot of room, which is good to hear for the mechanics to be added." I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about a couple of the 800-pound gorillas in the room. They have a couple.
Mm-hmm.
The one I want to really briefly touch on is, of course, just the whole origins of the game. That one is such a situation that I've mentioned all I want to mention about it. In terms of who actually designed it, there's some ongoing stuff with that, and that's one I'll leave it
Well,
out
it's
there.
not that who designed it. No. The main designer, he designed Lorcana. The question is, did he design it for Upper Deck with his Viking game, and then just take it and then said, oh well, I'll just put it with the Disney license, and it's the same thing. That's the question. So
Right,
it's not
and so
necessarily who designed
gotcha,
it. It's just
gotcha.
who owns
Who
who
owns the
actually
right?
who owns
Yep,
the core idea.
gotcha.
But
So
like
that's
here,
out there, and
but
so
here's the one thing I will say about this. This game is out in the wild now. It, barring some sort of ridiculous, like,
well, yeah,
hey,
but
this
you're
game will
right.
always. I think this game will always exist. Depending on who making money off of it might change based on that whole Upper Deck thing. But
Well, I mean, yeah, yeah.
I think
Well,
Pandora's box has been opened.
well, I'll put it this way: I don't, for 1 minute, and I don't think anybody should rest that that's the magic bullet that's going to keep it going, because you and I both know it's not. Okay,
Yeah.
if they lose something legally, this will be shut down, and nobody's going to come to your house and take your set. But that'll be the end of it. And so, of course, we hope that doesn't happen. And that's one of the reasons why I don't want to get too deep into this. But I'm glad you had that info, because we do want to put the right info, at least what's been put out. But the other thing that we want to put out there is the thing that we alluded to briefly last time, and what, of course, happened at Gen Con in terms of which was the game's official launch. And we've seen games in recent time have launches that bad or close to it, and they struggled. All right, Dice Masters comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the other Star Wars dice game that Fantasy Flight did
Yep.
initially, it took it a
Mm-hmm.
minute. So just bear that in mind as well. And you said it in your opening. I thought it was brilliant that you slid that in. You're like, hey, you're going to be playing it now, or is it going to be in February? Well, I mean, in February, who's going to really care other than Disney files? You know what I mean? And is that going to be enough
So
to
here's
keep
my
it going if we
so
don't get to play it until then? Is my
yeah,
question,
so
I
I've done a
guess.
lot of I've been following this quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. Um, and this is my prediction based on, so Ravensburger has not done itself any favors. And even more so, like there was an interview that came out from the CEO, or maybe one of the higher ups in Ravensburger,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't do himself any favors too, because
Mm.
basically what had been told is that,
Unfortunate.
hey, FLGSs are going to get the first wave so that they can build a community, and then we'll go to big box stores. So everybody's like, all right, that's great, that's fantastic. Well, as we said last episode, what turns out is that if you didn't have an organized play kit, they were canceling your orders, and they just weren't sending it to you.
Yeah.
Because they were basically they were holding back for what we believe they were holding back for the big box stores. It's like, okay, well, there'll be the glut of product there. Well, it turns out the interview that I was just mentioning, they didn't do that. It was just they didn't have enough to meet demand.
Of course not.
They had no idea. Now there is a second printing
Oh yeah.
that has kicked into gear as of within the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so stores are non-official play stores are expected to get product early September when the big box stores drop. But the problem is that most likely, because it's gonna be there and gone. Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be in a weekend, and then there
Yeah.
won't be, unless you live in the middle of nowhere
Right.
where the demand isn't that high.
Right.
But most likely,
And that
even in
doesn't
the
serve the community at all.
right, but most likely in the Walmarts of the world and the Targets,
Yeah, that
like,
doesn't serve the
you're
community.
as soon as no, but as soon as someone puts it out on the shelf, the first person who knows anything about it is going to buy every piece of product that there is,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to sell it at MSRP, and so then they're going to scalp it. And it's just going to be bad. But that's because the scarcity mentality
Yeah.
is going to be there.
Well,
But
I mean,
then I genuinely believe that by I think they're gonna get caught up by November. But then the Christmas rush is going to hit, because the one thing I think that they've done well is their product releasing, not their timelines and not their quantities, but these gift boxes and they're sort of their fat packs, if you will, and their starter decks, they're all packaged like Pokemon are. So where it's like it's really easy for a grandma to pick up for a young kid, with cards and themes and different things. So that toy factor is there.
Of course. Well, I mean, and again, it's Disney, and
And
it's
so
the Disney
yeah,
stuff that's aimed at a certain age demographic.
right,
That
right.
at
And so
this point in time, it doesn't matter where you grew up, whether you're in the U.S. or not. It's still aimed squarely at your children. But I want
well,
to
hang,
back up
hang
a
on. Let,
little
let me
bit.
let me finish my thought, and then I'll come back because I was going somewhere. So that's why I think in November they're going to get caught up with demand, but then you're going to see another drought of product because everybody's going to get it for Christmas.
Well,
It's going to start getting it there. But then February, I think, is when they're starting to look at Chapter 2, which is the second set, and then I think product is going to it'll stabilize, and that's when I think the real sweet spot. You're going to start to see like true metas because stores are actually able to carry it. People are going to want to play it.
do
So
you
it's going to be
have
it.
do you have your set in front of you right now?
I do, yeah.
So, do you know? You may have to look at the set. Is why I was asking. Do you know where this is made? Is this made in China or is this made in the U.S.?
I
And it
I
may.
don't know if I have anything that would mark that.
Well, yeah, the
Um,
packaging you threw away definitely said it because it has to.
let's see. All right, here's my treasure trove. Oh, that just looks really cool. It doesn't have any of that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
okay.
don't know.
Well,
I don't know right offhand.
this is what I was getting to. Stepping back into the production standpoint and publishing standpoint. So, regardless of where this is, and I know this is Ravensburger and Disney's money's behind it, so I don't know how much Disney is putting into it. So these are all definitely things I do not know, but I can talk about what I do know. In terms of production, in terms of trying to catch up, there is no flipping the switch. That's not a thing. They're not going to flip a switch and product is just going to show up. If they hadn't planned for this 6 to 8 months ago, maybe 10 months ago, it's not going to happen. It's not possible, is the problem. If it's being made in the US, it's possible. Sure, somebody may get bumped because you got to understand, okay? Panda and all the manufacturers in China, they're not sitting there waiting on the next project. They're all booked solid right now, and that's the point, right? Obviously, there's situations where they can come in and they can do things and maybe move somebody up in the queue. Maybe they're working extra. Some things happen, but you and I both know, by and large, these things are planned several months out.
Mm-hmm.
So if Ravensburger hadn't already planned prior to the launch to get this second printing out quickly, there is no quick. All of your timeline you just said sounds great, but it's not going to be until 2024, most likely, until we see any more product, if there wasn't some already in the pipeline. And that's just the way the world works right now. Between
Okay.
getting it done and getting it over here, if it's made in China, if it's made here, getting it to the rest of the world. And that's where the deep pockets could come in. Because sure, once they're made, you can air freight it. I'll be honest with you. Even though Ravensburger is not a small company, that is not worth it for a publisher in many instances for one very simple reason, and it's math. It costs more to ship it air freight than you're going to make selling it. Period.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, you can't. That's why companies don't do it on a large scale. That's why sometimes publishing companies, I'm talking about board game publishing companies, they'll eat a little bit for shows like Gen Con, obviously, and Essen, because the goodwill is worth it. Well, this isn't a goodwill time. This is, product on the shelf time. So I hope 100% that they already had it in the pipeline so that we see it moving, forward. And like you said, and your timeline sounds way better than what the reality could be. But I do want to say that based on my experience, yeah, if they don't have this stuff in the hopper, man, it's going to be slim pickings, which is unfortunate because I would like to see the game get a fair shake, particularly with how fun it sounds. And everyone that I know that's played it, that's talked about it, has enjoyed their time with it, which is fantastic. The whole let's just have fun. I love that about it. It's like, you know what, let's just have a fun time with the game. The fact that it's got some hooks built into it to grow, to add some more mechanics, the fact that they didn't try to jump into the world and say, hey, we're going to compete with the likes of Magic and Pokemon. And guess what? We're going to be just as complex in our first set. I'm glad that they didn't do that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
brilliant. Yeah, I love that they didn't do that. So I'm hopeful that these things do get worked out. But that's enough about that part, because we kind of had already talked about that. And quite frankly, that's going to play out in front of all of us. So we're going to all see it, right? If something comes up and Ravensburger has to make an announcement that, hey, we're not getting product until June or whatever, trust me, the whole world's going to know. You don't need Alex and Larry to tell you about that.
Yeah.
We will hear about that right off the bat. But like I said again, we would be remiss not to talk about this whole thing, because again, I was there at Origins for the Dice Masters launch. I was there for that. And I'm gonna say something here on the air that I've never said before. I've never said on the air. I may have told you the story, but I've never talked about it. I remember sitting in the room, because I was there with a retailer, and I remember sitting in the room with the retailers at the WizKids show when they were talking about all their stuff, and they talked about how big it was going to be, and they had a gravity feed. They had 2 gravity feeds of product up in the lounge for the retailers, and they talked about it, and they talked about the game and got everybody fired up about it. And then they said, hey, we're going these gravity feeds, these are live gravity feeds that came off the production. We brought them with us. We're going to put these in the lounge, and you guys can, just go through them and open them up, and you can kind of see the experience of what your customers are going to experience, what we're going to have. Everybody in that room was a retailer. I mean, they were all in. At the time, like Dave, I mean, it was what they did. It wasn't a part-time gig. These were the owners of the stores. They had also done the Dungeons and Dragons thing. We'd done some other stuff, and some things that were exciting. And in the ripple that went through the room when they did the Dice Masters, and then when they said when it was going to be available, which was like the middle of the next year because of the production stuff. So they tried to get everybody hyped up about those gravity feeds, and this is the sentiment that I literally heard. Who cares? Why should I go and open it? I'm not going to get any in my store till next year, and by then nobody's going to want it. That's verbatim what a store owner said. They took those gravity feeds up to that room, and they sat them on the table, and no one touched them. We sat there and went through them. That's where Dave got a really expensive card and die out of that. he pulled the rarest one of the first set. That's where he got that Black Widow. Whatever one was the rarest one. And Dave, we grabbed the card, and he sent me basically down on the floor to find the guy to tell him, hey, here, here's this card and this die that Dave pulled from the set. He didn't feel right keeping it. And the guy looks at it, I'll never forget it. And Dave wasn't there for this because he was up in the room. He shakes his head. He said, Dave, man, he's such a nice guy. He said, man, take this back to him. He said, he opened it. He can have it. He said, it's nothing, He said, I'm actually glad he's the one that opened it. He said, I'm glad it was him. He said, tell him with my compliments. Dave sold that for over $100. He sold it for a lot. But it was the rarest one. And I took it back, and Dave was floored. He wasn't, Dave, he was not broken up over it. He was like, oh, there's no way I'm keeping this. We just, but the guy was like, but I mean, these were the people who needed to sell it. And the moment they told them when they were going to get it, they were like, I don't have time for that. They wouldn't even open them, Alex. They didn't even open them. You know who opened them? Me and Dave sat there and opened them. And one other guy came over. That guy came over. He worked for the company at the time, and he opened a few. He was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And he wanted. And they came and they looked. They stood and they looked at us. Some of them, a couple of them, grabbed a few packs and opened them. And so I've seen that firsthand. And then, of course, you had to ask these same people when you got product, hey, sell it for us now. We got it now. We have it now. So I'm really hopeful that I still see Dice Masters. They just announced they're about to do a Marvel and DC boosters now, they're saying. Starters.
Oh, fun.
Starters. They're about to do new starters for it. It's a testament in my mindset to how cool that game is. Because that was about the worst launch you could have. And again, it wasn't botched in terms of the kind of the same way, but it was a product thing. It's like, hey, here's this cool game, but you can't get it. we don't have any dice. So I really do hope that Ravensburger does not deal with that. And quite frankly, I don't want anybody else to ever deal with that, what I saw, because it didn't feel good. I mean, it didn't. Dave was looking at me the whole time like, yep, that's kind of what, but I got it. I'm like, I get it. These people's livelihood. They don't sell this stuff. They don't pay the bills. So they can't sell a game. They can't take money today for a game that's not coming until next August, dude.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
So, all that, and I get that, and I really do. I who knows? And like time will tell.
Yes. We're
I
pulling
will.
for you, Ravensburger. We really
We
are.
are. We really are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Because I mean, I can't wait to get you in front of this because I think if you can come out in front of it with a full, like an unbiased opinion, which I think you have the great ability to do.
Yeah, I'm just ready to play it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you can get so 1st of September, this is supposed to drop in all the big box stores, Targets, Best Buys, WalMarts, online at Amazon.
Ooh.
I'm gonna say that it'll be there 1 second and then another second it won't. You might get lucky.
Standard
Um,
disclaimer, man. Don't overpay for it on eBay.
Yeah, and that's because but I will say this: you're probably more likely to find it in a physical store than you would be online. So just be aware of that.
Hopefully
But
your FLGS will get it. For those of you who don't have one, you already know the drill. I get it.
yeah,
For those of you that do,
well, and I think that's the hope is that there will be more product for them because ultimately this game lives and dies with them because that's where
right,
people will play it.
right,
That's where
right.
people will play it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, well, that's I plan to have more content on Disney Lorcana, but I knew with it coming out last weekend, I wanted to make sure that everybody heard
Yeah,
my experience and know
absolutely. And hey, man,
I
you can set up the
like
mic when you guys play a game next time.
yeah.
That would be
But
awesome.
I will say that I wholly as a collectible card game lover, I endorse this game substantially. And
100%.
yeah, it's just a delight, just a delight. So I hope it has more. I hope more people can get it. If not, just come to my house and we'll play. So
Y'all heard
uh,
it.
yeah, that's true. That's
Check the
true.
show
All right.
notes. We'll get you the address and the time slot.
Larry, I think that's time for a wow.
Yeah, that's definitely a wow because we wanted to do a deep dive just into that. So, absolutely, that is a wow. And I just want to remind everyone that where you listen to us, wherever you picked us up, if you could, please go and give us a quick rating. Give us a 4-star if you loved it. Give us something less if you didn't, and then tell us why. And we will obviously get to work on that. We are everywhere where you can find your podcasts. So all the usual suspects, please go out there and leave us a rating. We certainly appreciate it. And we are still into the summer of games. And this one is a special episode. So we're going to suspend just for this one time the summer of games game choice, because I think we both would say if we could that go play Lorcana, but
Yeah, go play it. Go play it. Yeah.
well, that's what we're going to say, but we already know, but we'll leave it at that. But thank you again, everybody, for your time and for coming out and hanging out with us and for definitely getting engaged with us out there on the socials. Mr. Alex, sir, take us away.
All right. So for the spoken token, this is Alex Wallace saying, keep playing.
And this is Larry Neal saying, keep communicating.
This has been the Spoken Token Podcast. If you'd like to interact with us, please contact us through email at thespokentokenpodcast@gmail.com, on Instagram at The Spoken Token Podcast, on Twitter at The Spoken Token, or on Facebook at The Spoken Token Podcast. And you can reach us through our BGG Guild, number 2656.
You are listening to a Pod Studio One Podcast Network podcast. Find more great podcasts at www.podstudio1.com.
Positive.
Who is the Mario guy then?
You can look him up